Good evening, everybody. Once again, it's on with the Black Comic Lords. I'm your host, Paul. And no, this is not Wakanda, Whiskey, and Blurredom, our normal Friday night live. We have a little special something for you guys today. As you know, for the last few months, the Black Comic Lords have been continuing a Black Comic Creators series of interviews. It is important that we not only support and uplift and throw shine on these Black comic characters and their and books, but the creators who toil every day putting these characters pen to paper for you and I to enjoy. So we want to give these creators their flowers and their accolades and definitely put shine on the hard work that they're doing, and that's what this series is all about. So we have upcoming on March 21st, Milestone Comics, which, as all of you know, is near and dear to my heart, is going to drop their 30th anniversary special. Milestone, just a few days ago, celebrated its 30th anniversary from its initial publication on February, I think it's 27th, 1993. So this 30th anniversary anthology book is 96 pages with 3 stories celebrating the rich history of the Milestone universe across the original comics run in 1993 to the Static Shock cartoon to Milestone 2.0 and beyond. With us tonight are the 2 creators of the initial story in that series called Universal's Beings. So that's Evan Narcisse, the writer, and the OG legend himself, Chriscross, the artist. Now, many of you will know the name Evan Narcisse. He's an American comic book writer, journalist, and video game narrative designer. Evan began his working career as a journalist who has reported on video games for several media outlets such as The Atlantic, New York Times, Time, Kotaku, IO9, and Polygon. As a comic book writer, Evan has authored multiple titles, which feature the Marvel comic superhero Black Panther. Since 2018, Evan's been involved with designing or consulting on narrative elements of several video games, including Insomniac Games' Spider-Man, video game series, Marvel's Avengers, and Redfall. Most recently, he wrote a story centered around Amazing Man for DC Comics for their Black History Month special just last month. Check out the website. We did a great interview with him and Daryl Banks, the artist of that work, which is an amazing work. Chriscross is a comic book illustrator known mostly for his stints penciling Milestone Comics' Blood Syndicate and Heroes, Marvel Comics' Captain Marvel and Slingers, and DC Comics' Firestorm, among many, many, many more books over his very storied career. Chriscross was also a co-creator with Priest of the comic book character Zero, which has been optioned by 50 Cent's G-Unit Films as an upcoming release. So with all of that, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Evan Narcisse and Chriscross.
Hey, y'all.
All right.
Good evening, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Good.
We appreciate you coming through and spending some time with us to talk about your upcoming book.
Let's do it. I'm
right.
ready.
All right. So let's start with what is this book? What is this anthology book?
It's love.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I rarely need prompting. No, it's love. Quite obviously, it's the way that DC Comics, as a publisher, is celebrating the 30th anniversary of Milestone Media's emergence into all of our lives on February 27th, 1993. I was in college when the original Milestone books came out, and they changed my life. I always tell people Milestone made me, and I'm glad that this universe, these characters, and most importantly, these creators, the ones who are still with us, like Cross, are here to be celebrated. So I was really honored when DC Editorial asked me to write the lead story in this book. Yeah, I have more to say about that, but I'm not going to cut you off, Paul.
That's all right. I've had an opportunity to look at the book. Obviously, I don't want to give any spoilers. But one of the things I think is fairly evident just by looking at the cover that we have here on the screen is you're seeing the original Milestone 1.0 universe on the same page as the Milestone 2.0 universe. So based on what's already been released with the Icon versus Hardware series, would you say that the concept of this book is sort of a result of what's going to come out of that series?
This is a standalone story. There are elements that are meant to tie into Icon versus Hardware. You can see a note and a thread of philosophical difference. But we obviously had a much larger story to tell away from the kind of antagonism that jumps off between these two characters. But I want to go back to the previous question because I want to know what this book means to Cross. I want to know what it's like for you to come back to these characters. I just know as a fan of the original comics, like when they told me you were coming back to draw the flashback pages, I emailed you, but I want you to tell the people out on YouTube and the internet, like, what does it mean for this book to come out and for you to participate in it?
Well, first of all, it's good to see that that Milestone has become a fixed position in the universe, especially when it comes to the comics universe. There's a lot of kids growing up now that see the modern version of it, but don't understand exactly how rough and tough the first version was and how still relevant it is. It just became a seed to what's happening now. And it's funny how I think many times I've had interviews about talking about Milestone before. I've had to say before that it's been it was definitely ahead of its time because people are still talking about the same stuff that's being talked about in these books, only I guess with a slightly different clip, but more modern clip, if you want to call it. But it was always modern to begin with. So the last book I did of Blood Syndicate was 33, issue 33, before I wound up doing Heroes and then eventually walking off Heroes to do DC stuff. So I remember finishing that last page and saying to myself, well, I'm leaving these characters behind. Like, I kind of rode with these guys for 3 years. And I was like, I've been kind of palling around with them for a while and being able to talk with Ivan Velez Jr., who was the head writer on that particular project. I want to make sure that people know that he was on that project too, because he really doesn't really get that much shine about that. He really pushed the envelope, and I pushed him and he pushed me when we were telling these stories. And I think we were doing a lot of really cool stuff at that particular point. And I didn't realize that 30 years later, I'd still be talking about it. It's just like it's still present. So, but jumping on these characters now, it's just like coming back home again. Of course, I spent the first book I ever did was the Blood Syndicate 3, I think it was. And I was on there ever since. So it was kind of like seeing Evan's script and kind of being reminded in some ways of what Ivan was putting down. And I was like, okay, I have to kind of set myself back a bit and kind of put myself back into the frame of these characters so I can be able to do it right. Because my brain is all over the place right now. But I was just kind of like, hey, dude, what's up? What's going on, man? What you been doing with your life? That kind of thing. So, and then, of course, being able to see the split version of these characters now and then, it kind of plays with the mind a bit because you always kind of wonder if you were able to do those characters now, what would they be like? And all of this is being answered in that book. So you're being able to do it. I mean, hopefully I did your script, I gave flowers to your script, but especially in the way I put the pencil down. But I just wanted to make sure that it had a lot of the elements of what was done before and what I was doing now. I think it was pretty cool to see it all coming together. I didn't see the ones before. I saw some of the pages before with other artists, and then I realized I was like, wait a minute, I'm actually drawing the old school characters again. I said, that's really cool. Because I was kind of wondering what I was doing my work now on then. It's like back then. It's like it kind of answers the same question. So
yeah, we're gonna get into that because you did some interesting things. You did some interesting things art wise. I want to talk about. but one of the things you mentioned was Evan's script. Now, like you, Evan, I'm an OG Milestone fan. Like I was reading Milestone. Milestone came out when I was in college as well. And then I had the opportunity to have Dennis Cowan come down and talk about it. And that just really sort of changed my whole outlook on comics. And for me, and I think for many other people, Milestone is kind of the standard when it comes to Black comics. It's the benchmark. And I don't think there are a lot of companies that have come out since and done excellent work and brilliant work to this day, but I don't think anyone else has really sort of still reached that benchmark yet. It's still the standard. And when you think about the writers who wrote for Milestone, starting with Dwayne McDuffie, Robert Washington III, may he rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Ivan Velez Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Evan, I'm not saying this just because you're here on the show, but honestly, you captured a little bit of elements of each one of those artists because you had the technical voice of Static when he's to the nerdy side, the geeky stuff. You captured Dwayne's voice there, and then you sort of got the witty repartee that Robert Washington had, and then you have the emotionalism of Ivan Velez Jr. within the story and the script and dialogue. So, I mean, hats off to you on that. Really good job. But from the jump, the first thing you notice about this book is that it points out that the Milestone 1.0 and the Milestone 2.0 have their own differences. I mean, on the very first page, it says under that blurb under Universals, under Beings, that there's a difference between these two universes. Was that kind of a comment between the dichotomy between OG Milestone readers like myself and sort of the newer readers of today?
I mean, subconsciously, probably, yeah. But, for those who might be watching that don't know about my personal career history, like I was a journalist before transitioning to creative work full time. And I was lucky enough to interview Dwayne McDuffie for The Atlantic in, I want to say, 2010. I don't remember. It was around the time Milestone Forever was coming out. And if you've seen that quote of Dwayne's floating around where he talks about race being central to American consciousness, I'm paraphrasing here. That was from the interview I did with him. But I remember asking him, if you're familiar with Milestone Forever, it was kind of his goodbye to that universe, which he was, a co-creator and founder of. I asked him, if you were creating Milestone today, like, would it be different? He's like, yeah, because it was meant to be of its moment, right? And I think that's the thing that Reggie and Dennis and Marquise and Chris Conroy, the editors who are help steering the reboot, have captured, right? Like Milestone is of its moment, right? It speaks to the issues that matter to marginalized peoples as they are experiencing them, right? So, Rocket's pregnancy was, a kind of retort to the moral panic around young unwed mothers back in the day. The fact that the Big Bang was a gang brawl was, again, with this public fascination around gang violence, right? Like people who have more proximity to these issues in communities doing storytelling that focuses on their perspectives, right? So I thought the same thing. I was like, well, okay, we know the new version of the Milestone universe, like the inciting incident was a police protest. We know the old one was something else. Like, so let's highlight the different kind of textures of each moment in time where these universes emerged, right? So it's something that is meant to speak to what's changed in our experiences as Black people, as marginalized people, and what hasn't, that was very much like top of mind for me when I was, thinking about what I wanted the story to be.
And one of the things that I noticed as a theme throughout this book, the story that you wrote, was the concept of also legacy. And I was really tickled when I saw these panels that gave a shout out to some of the original creators, the late great John Paul Leon, Noel Giddings, Robert Washington III, Joe Illidge. You had these panels that sort of had their names up on the in the book. Was that an intentional sort of homage to those creators?
Oh yeah, very much so. You know, one of the pages that Cross drew is like a street scene, and first pass, the awnings and the signage for the street for the stores were blank. And the editors asked me, "Hey, do you want to throw anything out there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I definitely want to." You know, that first awning is a reference to Maddie Blaustein, who was a creator, who was an editor and writer at Milestone, who later went on to be a voice actor who voiced Meowth in the Pokemon animated series.
Huh.
So, you know, and Robert Washington and so on and so forth. So, yeah, you know, like the thing of it is, my relationship with Milestone, like, it's gone from fan to journalist to creator, you know? And when you're a fan, you're like, oh, this stuff is dope. You know, you see the Milestone 100 cover process and you're like, it looks amazing, like nothing else in comics. You see Cross's art. You see people like Jean-Paul Leon, Umberto Ramos, who go on to become superstars, right? And you're like, it's dope, right? But then you get older and your consumption of the art form expands, and you start to realize, oh my God, it's not just dope. These are singular talents. Like, you know, I'm not trying to embarrass dude, but like I've been saying Cross is one of the most underrated artists in comics for years. He's a dude whose book if I knew he was on art, like I would at least pick it up, even if it was something I wouldn't ordinarily necessarily care about. The same thing for like, you know, J.H. Washington, you know, no, J.H. Williams, I'm sorry, got to start on Milestone books. You know, one of the things that's amazing about Milestone is that it was this incredible incubator of talent, you know? So the unfortunate, tragic fact that some of this talent isn't with us anymore, I want to honor that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you know, what Chris said before about like the fact that Milestone is still around 30 years later is like, you know, I'm sure people who've been reading comics for this amount of time can all like tick off characters, concepts, universes that have come and gone, you know, that haven't withstood the test of time. And then when you think about how much harder it is to come from a Black perspective, a marginalized perspective, when we're still in a larger kind of cultural construct that valorizes whiteness and that stuff, the fact that these characters are still around, like, really is a testament to the strength of the concepts that animate them, and the talents of the creators who brought them forth in their first iteration. So yeah, I had to, you know, memorialize that a little bit.
Yeah, I want to bring it back to one of the things you mentioned, Chriscross, your art style. Now, I agree with Evan. You're like one of the most talented artists in the world.
Thank you.
And you know, and I agree that I don't think you get nearly enough accolades. But here's something I want to point out to people. If you've read Milestone 2.0 and you look at Milestone, the original Blood Syndicate run that Chriscross did, you can see the differences in his art style. His art style has evolved over 30 years, as all artists do. But understand, this panel that we're looking at right now is from this new book. And that art style is the same art style that he had 30 years ago. He did a retro take on his style from 30 years ago for the flashback sequences of the story that take place back in 1993. Like, who does that?
I didn't even think y'all would catch that.
You didn't think we catch? Well, look, bro, Milestone fans will catch that. That's incredible, man. I mean, you know, hats off to you. I remember looking at the page. I'm like, wait a second, did he like take some panels from an old Blood Syndicate or something? And then when you notice that Noel Giddings also colored it and Chris Sotomayor colored it in the same style, that's wow. Was that intentional on your part to do it like that?
Well, I know in a lot of instances, it's funny thing about artists, right? Especially the cerebral ones. And I'm not going to pat myself on the back, because sometimes when you do stuff you don't know you're doing. And like I said, when you come back, sometimes you have the same. Somehow your brain kind of shifts you into the same place you were when you left. And I was getting the stuff as I was putting the stuff together, because some of the characters I wanted, it had been years, decades, since literally decades. Oh my God, that since I had to think about that, decades since I even seen these older characters, and especially like DMZ. Like I hadn't drawn that guy in 20 years, and I had to go back and make sure I was drawing him right. I still had the imprinted image of who he was in my head. When I started drawing it, it just kind of started drawing itself. And I kind of had to just let it go, you know. So then I realized, I was like, well, you know, there's not going to be a lot of room to do what I really want to do, and not a lot of time to do what I really want to do. But let me just kind of ape off my own style a bit and see if they catch it.
Well, I definitely caught it. So the first things that popped out, which is one of the first questions I wrote down.
And I think a lot of the images are more solidified than what I was doing back and forth back then, because I still hear Dennis in my head when I was first drawing it. Like, why do you feel the need to have to keep tipping the angle, man? Like, why can't you just draw it like, just show it like this, do like your style's this, and just do it, just relax, you know. I can still hear him saying that as I'm drawing that, just like I was standing right in front of him. So like inside the offices. So I was going back and forth, and I was kind of playing around with some of the stuff. I said, you know what, let me just see if I'm gonna just go back to I'm gonna look back some of the old books that I had and see if I could kind of absorb something and bring it back and see if anyone catches it. And I guess you guys got it, so that's good to see.
Yeah, another thing that Evan mentioned was the very historically significant coloring process. The what did you call it? The 100
Milestone 100 color process.
Milestone 100 coloring process. I don't know how the process works, but I certainly know when I see it.
So they used to use, I think it's the same brand, Doc Martens watercolor dyes.
Yeah.
And back in the days, that's how they used to do a lot of coloring a lot of books back in the days, before they started doing that print process. It was the 4-color process. Yeah. And they had all the little zippy dots and stuff like that they used to put on there. So when they came together and decided they were going to start doing color work, they said they wanted this a little more European. Because a lot of European artists, when they did their work, they use color dyes or watercolor or gouache, wherever it's
particularly in France. They use a lot of watercolors in France.
So, and you know, France, Spain, Italy, they did the same thing. So, some could I probably even got away with using mark, and you didn't even realize it was just that good. Yeah. So, and color pencil. So, I don't know if they went that far with the process. They probably could have. And sometimes I try to introduce it myself. I could get away with it, but we never really had the time to do that, because that kind of process takes a lot of time and care, and we only have so much time to get stuff done in a month. So you walk into the offices, you could smell the color dyes, and you can see Erica, you know, just sitting down in front of her table doing her thing, and then J. Scott Jones doing the same thing, and then you'll see Noelle on her desk doing the same thing also. So I always wanted to get Noelle to color something that I did. I can never get her to jump on anything I did. I eventually wound up getting her. It took 30 years to get it, but I finally got her. And I used to always say, Noelle, you got to color some of my stuff at some particular point. Even if I have to intrude like Mark Bright's pages to get it done, because I think she was coloring Icon.
Yeah.
So I managed to they did a jam issue, I think kind of to help him out, but it kind of worked in the way that it needs to. So like the way it's working with this particular book, I think I did like 2 or 3 pages where I did full pencils and someone else inked it, or maybe I did pencils and inks, and she finally got the color of that. So I kind of had that. I got 2 pages of her doing something, but to see her color the stuff now, I think she's using the same dyes in order to do this particular process.
That was one of my questions. Is she using the same sort of process to color?
Yeah, because they still sell them. I mean, you know, they still sell the products. You can't not find them. I mean, the internet's, you know, global. If they don't have them here, so she's probably getting them internationally. So
I don't know if this process can be emulated digitally, because I know a lot of colorists do digital coloring today. I just don't see how this process could be.
You could, but I think you have to kind of dumb down some of the color hues and kind of play with the way everything the brushes and stuff like that. you kind of have to mess with, the pathways and stuff like that in order to get to look a certain way. But you could you can do anything to computer, but there's something to be said about hand to the paper, to the brush, that kind of process. So some things like that can't be mimicked.
And shout out to Joe Illich, who I saw, just popped up in the chat. He mentioned something that's really important, particularly for newer readers who may not be familiar with the original Milestone books and the coloring process. Why I say it's historically significant is prior to Milestone, and I've been reading comics for a long time. Prior to Milestone, there weren't variations of color for Black people.
Mm-mm.
There was,
and I pressed that. We all pressed that.
Yeah, well, there was gray.
Mm-hmm.
All Black people were gray back in the day.
And
they eventually made us all brown number 5,
mm-hmm.
whatever that color is.
Number 10.
It wasn't 10.
You couldn't even see your face.
Right. And then Milestone came along, and then as you see in this picture here, you have variations of brown.
Yeah, we come in different shades and different flavors, man.
Right. And for a book, for a company, a publisher that emphasized diversity, where you have, Blood Syndicate is probably the most diverse of all the books that Milestone did.
True.
You had Asians, you had Latinx people, you had Caribbean people, Black people, you had every shade of brown imaginable, and the coloring process allowed for those colors to be seen.
And
as a young person reading that,
Blood Syndicate was almost primarily Latinos.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And it showed,
and that's because of Ivan's influence,
right? And it showed Latinos had different hues also.
Yeah,
and that's something that was never shown, and that was something I constantly had to fight back early in the days of DC, when I tried to bring the same thought process when I was doing Firestorm and some other places, and sometimes I get fight over that. So I was like, it's going to take a while for them to kind of graduate to the process 30 years later, but. You should be able to see someone who's caramel, or someone who's milk chocolate, or someone who's dark chocolate, dark cacao. Someone who's supremely light skinned. My mother's light skin with supremely light skin with gray, hazel eyes. So we come in different combinations, and I want to be able to show that even in the way I drew the characters. You should be able to look at those characters and say, there's something about that character I've seen before they put the color process into it.
Right.
So, and I try to echo that even from the writing. When a person writes a certain way, I try to get into the person's mind and what they were thinking of, and I try to add on top of that something that I've seen that I just walk past and say, okay, I can infuse that on here, and hopefully the colorist will be able to see it and kind of plug into that force, and just says, okay, I think he wants that person to be light skinned, and sometimes it's worked. So it's just all about jamming together and being cognizant of what's around you, and being able to pull what's out there into that space, which is the point of being diverse. It's not just one thing all the time. No one can just eat spaghetti every single night and enjoy it. After a while, you kind of get sick of it.
Another thing that makes Milestone really unique, particularly in the 2.0 version,
right,
is the fact that there's always been an emphasis on mentorship. And
right.
Now we have this Milestone initiative where DC and Milestone have partnered with Ally and have started this initiative to bring up the next generation of upcoming creators. Mm-hmm. And I noticed in this particular book, you had Atagan Ilhan, Dexter Vines, Juan Castro. You had these new creators that were in this book. Were any of these Milestone initiative graduates?
Yes, I'm not sure of the first guy, but
Atagan is
is he?
Yeah, he's part of the first Milestone Initiative cohort, and this isn't his first professional comics work. I believe he did a run on Poison Ivy with G. Will Wilson, but I think he might be the first one to do a Milestone book.
Apparently it was Poison Ivy.
Yes, yeah,
was his first work.
Yeah, so I know there is an upcoming book that's featuring the Milestone Initiative cohort, the initial cohort. So, the thing that's amazing about that is, breaking into comics is hard, especially if you're trying to break into big two comics. And, even me, like I was a critic and a journalist who covered comics, and I had a pretty fair knowledge of like what it means to what it takes to put a book together. But like, guess what? Everybody writes comic book scripts differently. Cross can tell you. Priest's scripts look different than Dwayne's scripts look different than et cetera, right?
Mhm.
So if you're in there and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I write for an artist to interpret this this image, this panel, these flow of events, right? Like there's 1,000 different ways you can do it. So the fact that you're getting people like Dennis, like Reggie, and the folks at DC Editorial to mentor a new incoming class of comics creators, specifically focusing on people from diverse and marginalized backgrounds, is like amazing. It's the exact circumstance that the original Milestone founders did not have, could not benefit from 30 years ago. So the fact that this is happening in their name, I think, is really amazing.
There was still mentorship, though. I mean, in the old offices, it's sort of like in the hood.
Yeah, informal, right?
Basketball, like when you're playing basketball, there's always an older guy that sees a younger guy kind of coming around, and they kind of get into some kind of trouble. They kind of pull them back, like, no, we want to do this. Just stay away from that. It was that kind of atmosphere. Everyone, it was a family. When you came in, they asked you questions. They kind of ride you a bit, and they want to see what you're worth, and then they basically show you the right way to do things, and it kind of sticks in you. And then we see other people, someone like John Paul Leon, whose hands I wanted to break the first time I saw him. But at the same time, when I hugged him, I actually saw him, I hugged him. I was like, dude, I've never seen work like that. And it was like a gradual thing where Matt Wayne, who was also part of the cast back in the days, he was saying that John Paul Leon would see some of the stuff I was doing, and I was like each page was getting better and better and better, and he was doing the same thing, but he didn't know I was looking at his stuff, and he was looking at my stuff. We were literally aping off each other, we're trying to one up each other, and didn't even realize it.
I'm going to be a big old nerd and make a reference. One of Miles Davis's classic quintets had both John Coltrane and Cannibal Adderley. This is the band that recorded Kind of Blue. And Miles would whisper in both their ears, like, you hear what Train's doing? You really should do that. Like the way he's like tripling notes like that, whatever. And he'd go to Train like, oh man, Cannibal is like smoking you on that. You better step your game up, blah, blah, blah. Pitting them against each other, so that the whole enterprise would like rocket off into the stratosphere, So it's hilarious to hear that was happening low key in the Milestone office. And
we used to give each other books from stuff that we were looking at. And he was, he's look at Doug Wilder. He looked at so many other characters.
Toth, you can see a heavy Alex Toth.
Alex Toth. Big Alex. That was like the foundation.
The foundation, yeah.
And he was showing me Alex Toth, and I was showing some other stuff I was looking at, like some Asian stuff I was looking at. Ma Wing Shing. He was like, "Oh my God, you looking at this? This guy's crazy." So we used to sit down having talks, and we were literally just going back and forth, showing each other what we were looking at. And we thought, in some cases, his stuff looked like, I said, I just did that panel somewhere else. He did it better than I did. Oh, I can't have that. So we would go back and forth doing that. At one particular point, we were just kind of laughing at some of the stuff we would bring. So, and then
Joe said Dennis Cowan was Miles Davis.
Yeah, he was just he started. Yeah, he kind of like, you want to look at this. You should look at this. This is what I'm looking at. You should look at this. And we would just absorb it, and we would just like take that stuff and just keep. I mean, I got a lot of stuff he gave me up in here in my my bookcase still. So, yeah, I mean, and still to this day, I'm still like looking for all the stuff that John Paul Leon looked at, because the way he centered panels, man, the way he every single panel was powerful, and I always wanted to have that. A lot of times I don't get the chance to do what I want to do because of time. That may change as time goes on, but he just had an eye for cinema. And you could look at his stuff and just think it's dated in a future way. It's weird. And I mean, there was a lot of great artists that kind of walked up through Milestone, and we all had to go through a certain gamut, and we were doing something a certain way. We just kind of leaned over and said, you should probably watch the tangent on that. You want to kind of pull that out. We just helped each other. And even when it came to the writing, even with Joe Illers, I mean, I've known this in high school. So we just kind of jammed, and he would see stuff. He's like, I liked what you did there. Would you ever think about doing this? And I was like, okay. next time I'm gonna see if I can one up it. And then we'll kind of go back and forth with that also. So, you know, I mean, with Dwayne there, Dwayne, you know, the big guy, he was there, and he had his little head tricks he liked to play too. So the mentorship was always there. We were always trying to keep each other in line. It was kind of this cohesive family without meaning to. It was kind of like people kind of wanted us to fail in a lot of ways, and we would hear it. So Milestone's Black Comics wound up surviving all of it because they had to go through a war to get there.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of different people trying to take it down, and a lot of other people who were even from our own culture trying to take it down, trying to either ape off of it and doing a poor job, or trying to tell lies about it in order to try to create some sort of drama about it. I'm like, I don't understand this. We're all doing the same thing. Why is this happening? So
one of the people in the chat, frustrated fans, said, "How hard is it to draw what a writer is visualizing in his mind?"
I guess when you're doing it all the time, you don't really think about it. But sometimes if you don't truly get it, you have to kind of call the writer, have a nice chit chat with them, maybe about a half hour, just kind of.
It depends on the writer and it depends on the artist. Yeah.
It
depends on the writer. It depends on the writer.
Right. And you usually have to kind of like spiritually kind of plug into their head and kind of find out if I can mirror what I think he's thinking. I'm usually pretty good at that. I can be able to pull that out and give it to them better than they ask for. That's my challenge. Right. Me and Christopher Priest go back and forth like that all the time on Zero. He'll say, "You think you can do that?" I'm like, "You kidding me? Stop playing." And I'll come back with something else. He go, "Oh, are you freaking kidding?" You call back and laughing, just like ah, and you hang up. You know, that'd be as fast as a call would be. And
it's important to have that communication between the two of you.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I like the idea of being able to see, like Evan's script was pretty. It wasn't simple, but it was simply put. If you get what I'm saying. So, but and I'm not. This is not disrespect because a lot of people
No. If you read the story, for those that are watching this, when you read the story, you'll understand exactly what Chriscross means by that.
Right. I mean, he wants this and he wants that and he wants this, and I'm like, okay, but I can add to that. But if I do that, it's going to be too much. I'm not okay. I won't mess with it. I'll add what I think I can in the panels and kind of take some off so that people can see it clearly, because that's my process. And when he sees it, he'll see if I missed the mark or not. And I'm going to gather to see and call me, curse me out. You didn't.
You know, and to piggyback on that, you know, I wrote my pages. There's a panel count, right? Oh, this one's 5, 6 a page or whatever. And you know, when you're a writer, you're giving work to the artist, right? Like, let's be real. Artists have to do the heaviest part of the lifting when it comes to
world building all the time.
So, you know, you try to be careful about your panel counts and whatnot, and how many characters are in the panel. And you know, I get these pages back, and there's more panels, and there's more stuff going on in the panels than what I wrote. And that's Chris as an artist multiplying, amplifying what's in the script, right? And you know, he's changing the pacing. It's wow, Joe. I
think Joe's trolling you a little bit.
Reading them chat,
No, but the thing is, like, this has happened to me. I've been lucky enough to have this happen to me a bunch of times, where like you get art back, and you're like, that's not what I wrote.
Not at all.
It's better. You know, because the pacing changes, the areas of focus change, the body language sometimes get amplified or focused on in a different way. So it really is collaborative. And, you know, unfortunately, monthly comics can be a really hard place to find that collaboration because it's about deadlines, get it out the door, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But the environment that Cross is talking about in the old school Milestone offices, I was lucky enough to be there a couple of times when I was a kid. And it was incredible. That energy was amazing. Yeah. You know, quick story. When I was in college, they were hiring interns, and I applied to be an intern, and Dennis and Dwayne interviewed me. And I will never, ever forget this, even though it's 30 years ago. Like, Dennis was like, you'll be okay, like, sweeping up the floors and whatnot. And I thought he was joking with me. I was like, maybe, sure, I guess. But, like, you know, he was being real. He's like, look, this is where you start. And when you look at Dennis Cowan's career, he starts like at 14, 15 years old with Neil Adams and the continuity comics and drawing backgrounds for Legends. Like, that's where you start, you know? Real quick, this project is not full circle, but it's like, you know, orbit around the moon or the sun twice, because I was lucky enough to be a story producer on Milestone Generations, the film documentary, which means that, you know, I was hired for my expertise on Milestone, and along with Justice Whitaker, the director, shout outs Just, we did the interviews that you guys are seeing on camera. So, you know, when Cross is talking to the camera, talking about the old school days, he's talking to me, he's answering my questions. So, like, the fact that I got tapped to do this book, like, really is a dream come true, you know. But also, it's like, okay, if Milestone means anything, it's about like passing the baton, right? Like, you know, indirectly it gets passed to me. You know, Dennis passes it to Chris and that cohort. Like, and all I want is to see these characters continue to grow and move forward into the future. Sorry, Paul, I know I'm riffing. You got
no, man. It's important. Like that's always been the theme of Milestone. Like like Chriscross just pointed out. Although they didn't have a formalized Milestone initiative 30 years ago, there was always the concept of these mega creators. You know, your Dennis and your Dwayne. You know, these mega creators bringing up these younger creators and teaching them and mentoring to them and bringing them up. And a lot of these guys are superstars now. That's always been a theme. So the full circle makes absolute sense. You know, I
mean, it should be a surprise as an initiative, right? I mean,
right. It didn't surprise me at all. Like, that's completely consistent with the Milestone way.
Right.
I'm reading this story and I'm reading this dialogue, Evan, that you wrote about with Virgil. You know, one of my partners in Black Comic Lords, Rich, he's also an old school Milestone guy. His favorite character is Static. And one of the things that he's always been owning is like, you know, the thing I have with Milestone 2.0 is that it's not my Static. I miss the geeky science, you know, repartee guy. And I'm reading this, and you emulated that the same way Dwayne and Robert Washington did 30 years ago. Like that whole geeky, you know, well, you know, I'm going to take, you don't understand how electromagnetics work, and this is how I'm able to reverse this and the polarity and make a shield. And I'm like, God, that was dope. It's like you were channeling them or something.
The Evan was reading that compendium.
I was. There's a tweet from me when I was, you know, after I turned in the script in, when solicitations came out, where it's like post-its on every page. But, you know, like, look, a couple of things. Let's not throw any shade on what Vita and Nick are doing, which is
no shade at all. It's just there's differences in when time periods go by.
You know, different creators play to their different strengths, right? You know, and one of Dwayne McDuffie's strengths was that he was an actual freaking genius. The man had, I believe, a PhD in applied physics. You know, some of his work as a student was used to help guide cruise missiles. Like, there's a lot of stuff, you know, unfortunately, we couldn't put into the documentary. But like, amazing stuff about Dwayne as a creator, right? And Robert Washington and Ivan Velez and so many people who walk through those halls and touch these pages. So yeah, like, you know, this is an aspect of Virgil that serves the story, right? You know, I'm sure if Vita and Nick continue telling their version of Static, they'll touch on this or other aspects that are important to the story. You know, one thing that I've loved about Static Season 1 is like they show Virgil being that super compassionate, really understanding character. You know, he has a huge heart. Yeah, and cool. You know,
he's way cooler than the original one.
Yeah. So, you know, again, highlighting these differences in the different narrations of the characters is really, really important. Like, not just in this story, but as Milestone, as the universe evolves, you know, and, you know, part of that evolution from the beginning to now is, you know, it's kind of a dated term, but like, it's multicultural, you know, like everybody from the original Milestone cohort talked about how, like, these aren't just Black comics. Yeah, it's a Black founding company, but, you know, Dwayne and Michael Davis and Derek Dingle and Christopher Priest, who was there in the prehistory of Milestone, and Dennis, of course, like, they all knew what it was like to open up a comic book and see a character from your same cultural ethnic background be presented like really whack, you know? And they were like, okay, if we feel like this, then The Asian readers probably feel like this. Latinx readers probably feel like this, and so on and so forth. So they really made a universe that embraced like everybody and gave people, the chance to tell their stories. Milestone has some of the first transgender characters that you'll ever see in superhero comics. Has the first like loving lesbian relationship you will see in superhero comics that I can remember. That was out. You can talk about Mystique and Destiny in the X-Men.
Got nothing on Donner and Blitzen,
but they were in the closet, because like I'll just be blunt. The
closet?
No. Mystique and Destiny.
What closet was that?
No. Donna just busted out the closet. She kicked the door down.
They were holding each other.
So I would say the editorial courage just wasn't there at other publishing houses to be like
I don't think they knew what to do with it.
Yeah,
I don't even think it was courage. I don't think they knew what to do with it, because there'd be times you'd be talking to them and they would just kind of space out like, you have to explain that to me. Like, really? So I would have these conversations. So yeah, I'm just like, I watch a lot of Roland Martin, right? And he always has his prime directive is always making sure that people of color, Black people in America, have a place to tell their stories. Mm-hmm. That they have a place, not just a place, but to be able to control it and not let anyone have any other say other than what you say. Not people goes, well, I feel annexed by what you're saying. It's like, no. This is what we're saying. We listen to what you had to say. Now it's time for us to tell the story. Now, maybe you'll sit back and relax and let us be the griot. That's still happening now. So I know you were saying, I don't know if you thought that, maybe I heard it wrong, that multicultural was dated.
Yeah.
I don't think it's dated. I think it's right on time. It's always been there. I think people have a lot of different words. They have too many words for something that's really simple. And I think that with a camera like the way Milestone has, that kind of shines light on everyone, but doesn't make anyone better than anyone else. Yeah. They're all in this soup. They're all in this pot, and they're going through stuff. And it's not true. It's not a political thing, but people make it a political thing. They just live in life. And that's what it's supposed to be told. It's supposed to be as life, not one trying to service the other. So much for you to look at that book and say, hey, my mother just said it to me the other day, and they're from Jamaica, or she sounds just like her, or the way she looks just like my grandma.
Right.
Or even if there's a white person in the book, they go, yeah, my father just said that to me today to go do that. He said it just like that. And he looks just like that. That's how Milestone was. It wasn't trying to pick a fight. It wasn't trying to turn anything on. It was just there. It was just doing things. And I think a lot of people didn't know what to do with it. So when it was all said and done, they're still doing the same thing. And the fact that DC decided to bring it back, and that Dennis and Reggie Hudlin fought so hard to bring it back in the guise of I wouldn't say the shadow, in the light of Dwayne McDuffie and all the people who worked hard on these books going forward. I think they wanted to keep that same energy going, and it really hasn't. I mean, it made it twisted a bit because of the modernity of it all, but when it's all said and done, it's still the same universe. You still got the same. This Dakota is still being protected by Blood Syndicate. Static is still standing up to show he's not hiding his intelligence. He's being a beacon of light for a lot of other people there in the midst of a game. Well, not game war. I guess at that point it's a BLM war. You still have Icon being who he is. You have Hardware being who he is. So much that they're fighting with each other's values now. So it's a fun universe, and I'm sure there's a lot more that's going to come from it. But you don't realize how deep it is until you start reading the stuff. And there's someone who just hit me up on one of my on my fan page I have set up on Facebook, who said he didn't know what he's just Southern guy, this white Southern guy chilling in Georgia somewhere. And he saw a lot of the Milestone stuff show up, but he really didn't see anything about himself that he wanted to get into. His mother thought a certain way, his father had a certain way of thinking. He just decided to go out of his way to read the books. And he said once he read it, he was hooked. He was like, the whole other universe. I don't even know, do people really live like this? And he was not even talking about, of course, no black man walking on electromagnetic powers, but the fact that yes, black people have family. They go through things. They have conversations. There's a father that's usually actually in the household, no matter what they tell you. There's a mother that's listened to, that's actually allowing the man to be the lead in the family. He's teaching his son, this is how you put on put on shingles on the roof. Instead of having a conversation about why he's so hurt, he said, "Grab this, give me that nail right there. Let's let's fix this roof." And then they have a conversation, and then they apologize to one another without really having to say it. Rubs his son in the head, and he goes back down the steps when his girlfriend is downstairs. That happens. So that's something that I'm glad that Vito told it in that situation. Vito Ayala told it in that situation, and that we were able to I was actually able to do that scene, which was pretty cool. But it was the same as what was done in the 90s, and that's where all books should be. I think books should tell a story. It's not just about being, full of flash and full of explosions and stuff, unless it's pushing the story along.
To that point, there was on page 23 of the book, there's a scene where you have the two, I don't know, I'm giving any spoilers, but there's a scene where the two icons from the two different universes are talking to sort of the larger group. And they talk about paying homage to what came prior and how the OG Milestone universe has sort of mutual respect. It's like we have disagreements back in 93, but we still always had mutual respect for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying this, the newer counterparts should follow their lead. Was this a statement from the sort of the OG Milestone creators to the new young bloods coming up?
I mean, look, one of the things that's so slippery to hold on to in modern society, and Black people and other marginalized people have their histories erased, exploited, and taken away from them. So we don't always have control of legacy and what gets passed on to other generations, right? So making that explicit was really important to me. Again, Milestone made me. I wouldn't be who I am, or able to do this if I didn't have the careers of people like Dwayne and Joe and Priest to look at, and just know that possibility was there. That's one thing. And the other thing, Paul, is if you look in the background, the shot that's on the screen in the backdrop is the confrontation between Icon and the Blood Syndicate. They had beef like 2 times in the original comic books that I can remember.
Right.
And there was generational beef, right? And I think that, intergenerational dialogue is something that's so important to allow our communities to cohere and evolve. You know what I'm saying? And it's it's easy to look at it like an old head getting all in their feelings about the De La Soul catalog dropping. I'm wearing my Sticks is High shirt, but it's easy to make fun of that stuff. But it's what do we lose when we don't hold on to our legacies? What do we lose when we dismiss them or minimize them? And that goes the other way. If you're an older person, Chris's age, my age, your age, and you see these young cats, I don't listen to a lot of new hip hop, but you know what? If I can curse, I fuck with Saba hard. You know what I'm saying? I'm that kid is talented. It's not the same kind of rap I grew up on, but I see there's craft there, there's artistry there. And I think, again, that intergenerational dialogue, was an important part of the original Milestone comics, right? You look at the Icon and Rocket's relationship. He's like, "You sure you want to have this kid?" I don't know. And, as we know, Icon is a politically conservative character, right? But they found a way to talk to each other about their issues. The original Milestone comics, when Icon was going back to the collective, going back to space, she's like, "Screw you then." I'm mad. We have to be able to talk to each other across generations if we're really going to nurture our communities. And I feel like making that part explicit in the script was not just about diegetic textual interface between the two versions of these characters. It's about hey, this is something I value as a Black person living in the world. When I'm able to talk to my dad about what he went through, and when he's able to ask me, that's meaningful. That's then something I can pass on to my kid, and hopefully they can pass on to their kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's say being real.
These conversations between the 93 Milestone universe and the modern one I thought were really interesting. Despite the passage of time, despite the change in cultures, there was still so much that really hadn't changed. The underlying core of who the characters are still the same.
Yep.
You would think they would be like, oh, well, you dress funny or you talk funny, or beyond that surface stuff. At the core, the characters remain the same, and that's speaks back to something that I've been saying for years, is that it's timely that Milestone is coming back now, 30 years later, because Milestone was 30 years ahead of its time when it came out. Like the stuff that they talked about 30 years ago are just now becoming sort of normalized as issues that you can talk about and embrace and discover and explore. And they did it 30 years ago before there was names for it. So I that was
like, it's like now we have a term for the collision of oppressions that people from different marginalized backgrounds can experience. Right now we have a term called intersectionality, right? So Black and queer, you're getting the Black oppressions and you're getting the queer oppressions, right? So but that was in Blood Syndicate back in the day, you know, they showed that, and one of the things that was so brilliant about what Chris and Ivan Velez, what they did on Blood Syndicate is this was an era when the political discourse was focused on the super predator, right? Like these scary Black criminals who are basically apex predators, lock your doors, whatever. They're gonna come get you. They'll break into your house with their superhuman strength or whatever. What Chris and Ivan did in Blood Syndicate was they humanized the people that politicians and mainstream news media were telling you to be afraid of. You know, Tech Nine's name is a dude based on a weapon that was hot in the streets. You know what I'm saying?
He's the real Tech Nine. So it's
right, exactly. He's a living weapon. You know, and you look at a character like Masquerade, who's that's gender fluidity, that's non-binary stuff way before it was even a term. You know?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
and then you take two queer characters, Masquerade and Fade, having beef with each other. One of them's in the closet, one of them's not, you know, and they confront each other. And it's soap opera melodrama, but it's such rich text that reflects, again, the lived experiences of people who were way on the margins in 1993. And now that certain aspects of society have allowed these people to live their lives out in the open the way they want, it's even more relevant because now you have a political wave of activism from the right that wants to shove these people back to the margins, you know, that wants, look, we see it, they don't want our books in classrooms. They don't want our classes being taught, classes about our history being taught, Milestone is coming back at the right time. And one thing we know is that superheroes can be aspirational, right? They show you all the different textures of the human experience, right? They're just blown up and made larger than life. And when you're bold and strong, like a lot of these characters are, you can't ignore them. You can't shove them to the side. And hopefully real people will draw inspiration from that stuff.
Yeah, what's interesting when you mentioned that too, my on the original Milestone run, my favorite book was Hardware. My second favorite, very close, was Blood Syndicate. And in large part because of what I recognized in the characters is what I recall from my own life. Evan, I know you're like me. You're the son of immigrants from the Caribbean. You know, my family's from Jamaica. Yours from Haiti. I think all three of us originally from New York.
Yeah.
That urban setting that you have in Dakota, and Paris Island, and the multitude of cultures between people from the Caribbean and Latin people and Black people and Asian people, that whole melting pot or salad, I'd like to say more than a melting pot. That's something you just didn't see in comics. I never saw that in comics before that. I never saw other people, when I go out of my block in Brooklyn, that's what I saw. I saw all of those different people, but I've never seen my block in a comic book before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really resonated with me with Blood Syndicate.
And I think it's even better now. If you read Jeff on the new Blood Syndicate, which Cross also drew in amazing fashion, yeah, those stories are like that's about the block. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's about the hood, you know. And again, like yes, gang beef is still part of the foundation of the new version of Blood Syndicate, but it's about like, well, why are these people fighting? You know, what resources don't they have? Why are they beating each other over turf, or why are they selling drugs? You know, like all that stuff is being explicitly explored in these stories, and you know, at the risk of sounding like I'm preaching even more, it's like it's the kind of material that like other superhero comics like kind of stumble around because again, the further away you get away from the experiences, the more you exoticize them, the more you stereotype them, and it's like the big triumph of to me of Milestone Comics past and present is like there's multiplicity, right? So like, you know, how we get tokenized by having only one or a few, right? You know, like you've got countless black characters in the Milestone universe, right? So that way you can show the different textures of each kind of lived experience, right? Like Icon's a dude who's like rich, you know, like he's not in touch with the hood anymore. Meanwhile, Rocket comes in and talks about, hey, here's what's going on. We could really use like somebody to look up to since you can actually fly. Maybe that's you. You know, and then you contrast that with like Static. You contrast that with, you know, Dharma. You contrast that with all these other characters who come from different walks of life, you know, like Aqua Maria and Brick House are both Latinx female characters, and they have wildly different experiences. You know, one's bilingual, one speaks only Spanish. You know, I don't think Aqua Maria ever really spoke English in the original run. Chris,
not the whole version. No.
Yeah. So you know, like, and that's real. You know, like, we all live our lives in different ways, and there's like value and worth to be had in each one of those experiences. And you only get there by multiplicity, in my opinion.
And also you have to understand that the people who led Milestone, that they're I think they were, I don't think they realized, but in a spiritual sense, they wound up finding people that were just like them, writing and drawing those books and calling those books as everyone in those offices. If you talk to any single one of them, they came from different places, but they all said the same thing, and there was no hiding behind it. They said what they said, and that was it. There's no me backtracking what I said. If Dwayne said something, he meant it. If Dennis said something, he meant it. If I said something, I meant it. If John Paul said something, he meant it. It wasn't like there was no, I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings. No, we meant to say that. And we're going to put it there so that you have no choice but to see it. And I think people kind of glommed onto it and realize that there are not many books out there that do that. You know, you say what you say, you do what you do, and you tell the story you want to tell, and people either like it or they won't. And even now, to some extent, I think it's still pushing the aesthetic based upon the way it was set in the 90s, but it's still saying what it needs to say, but it's still entertaining at the same time, which it's supposed to do. You know, as I always said, telling the stories.
Look who it is.
Jeffrey Thorne just
right
must have heard you talking about him because he just popped up.
Made it.
Shout out to Jeff Thorne. We were just talking about you, boy. Your ears must be burning.
There's some Joel stuff up there too.
Important question for you guys that I forgot to ask you. Is this story canon?
Canon?
Yeah.
I would say so.
Well, I mean, because sometimes you could have these Elseworld stories, and it's like, you know, we don't necessarily know if this is part of the main continuity or.
I mean, look, that's ultimately going to be
hands changing hands, right? Like kind of passing the torch, like they physically come to.
I just want to make sure there's no backsies from this story.
Look, man, you can't be spoiling this story for people, Paul. Like you're over here gloating. You calling out page numbers on page 23. This happens. It's like, let the people read it, okay?
No. I just want to know, without any spoilers, is what you do in this, is it considered canon?
I certainly hope so. You know, like
that's the whole book.
That's ultimately up to DC editorial, right?
Right.
Like, and you know, the main thing about canon and how it's established is like when other creators use what their predecessors have established and build off of that. You know, like, I mean, to throw a reference out, you know, from the House of Ideas, like how many years did we go without seeing the White Wolf after Priest stops writing, Black Panther, but people pick him up, and then their position in the canon of the universe gets cemented further, right? So I think, if we're lucky, we'll see that there are some seeds planted in this story that will grow in the Milestone universe. So that's really I can say to that. Like, I'm a freelancer. I drop in, they ask me to do a thing, I drop out. Like, if it's up to me, I'd build off of this. The same thing with Amazing Man. Yeah, I'm plugging it because I was really proud of that story.
You should be. You should be. If you know what he's talking about, both buy the book, read the article that we did. It's on our website. Interview with him regarding Amazing Man, because it's an amazing book.
What's really weird was at the time I was drawing those 15 pages, I was drawing Black Lightning, the Black Lightning story, and I was also doing something for Marvel, Black Panther and Thor. So
yeah.
You drew Cheryl Lynch's story, right? Yeah. So
I was working that month, but
shout out to Cheryl Lynch
all at the same time.
Right.
Thank you, Azure Beast.
One of the things I also wanted to ask you, the title of the story is Universal Beings. What does that mean?
I was hoping somebody would ask that. It's the name of an album that I love by a musician called Micaiah McCraven, who works kind of in the jazz idiom, but like an updated approach to instrumental jazz music. I just thought it fit. And, if I can be extra corny here, if y'all been watching for an hour and haven't figured out that I'm corny yet, I don't know what to do with y'all. But, there's kind of like a sub theme of Milestone creators naming stuff after songs or albums. America Eats Its Young from Blood Syndicate was P-Funk album, obviously. I'm probably forgetting some more stuff.
Static.
Exactly. Yeah, Static. So, like, again, multi-generational dialogue across different media idioms. That's how we do it, and that's why I did it.
One of the reasons I also asked you about the whether this story was canon was, you've got these characters meeting each other. Are any of these characters going to be affected in such a way by meeting their other universe counterparts that will have lasting effects in the future, you think?
I plead the fifth.
Fifth is a perfectly acceptable answer. Some of the characters we have not seen in the Milestone 2.0 universe yet are Donner, Blitzen, characters you mentioned, Death Wish, Zombie, and I think we already know from the solicits that Shadow Cabinet's going to be in here. Can we expect this story that you tell here to have an opening for those characters to possibly show up later on in Milestone 2.0?
I would love that. I didn't want to consecutively plead the fifth, so I was trying to be creative there.
All right.
See, Jeff, you came right on time. Thank you.
Don't answer that.
That's why I'm shaking my face, holding my mouth.
You're blocking me, man. You're blocking me. All right. So, what do you both hope readers will get out of this story?
I mean, again, I've been banging this drum since before I was a journalist, since before I was a creator. Like, Milestone is deeply important to the modern comic book landscape, by virtue of the people that founded it, by virtue of the talent they nurtured and then put out in the world. People like Cross, people like John Polion, J.H. Williams, Humberto Ramos, Matt Wayne, Noel Giddings, Jason Scott Jones. I could go on and on. Like the Milestone alumni have been on some of your best comics. Sean Martin, bro. I could go on. So Milestone's important. And as like a locus, an epicenter of creative nurturing and talent, like, it's important in that way. And as an exemplar of like how to do diversity and inclusivity, I think, right, in a way that's expansive, in a way that invites other people in and lets them feel seen and heard. It's important for that. And like most importantly, these characters are fucking dope. You know, like you know, if you know your Milestone history, you know the founders all came in and it's like we're gonna build off archetypes. So yeah, like Hardware is a Batman, Iron Man archetype, but like he's also his own character. He also lets you access stories that are only possible by moving through the Black experience, you know? And it's the same thing. Yeah, you can look at Blood Syndicate and be like, oh, they're just like the X-Men. But guess what? The X-Men were being like subtextual about a lot of their stuff. And with Blood Syndicate, it was right in your face, you know? Yeah. So these characters are great, and they deserve to have the same kind of long publishing histories that Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Hulk, et cetera, have, you know? Like, you know, one of my personal beliefs about superhero publishing is that like the more idioms and iterations a character can hold, the healthier that character's mythos is. So yeah, if you're a certain age, like some of us are, you saw the Adam West Batman and you cringe. You're like, ugh, it's corny. But guess what? The fact that Batman can be corny, and Miller, O'Neill, and Adams can do like a back to basics gothic pulp influenced Batman, and then we get a Batman that's in the far future and Batman Beyond. Like the fact that Batman can exist in all these modes means that he's super healthy. And I want the same for the Milestone characters. I want, you know, these characters to have legacies, and different mutations and iterations, like a lot of these other long-standing characters. That's what I want from Milestone. So that's a long-ass answer, but that's what I want people to take away with it. There's so much possibility within these characters, metatextually in the real world and what they mean, and inside the text of the fiction itself.
What about you, Chriscross? I mean, you were there from the very beginning, and you're back again, back in the thick of it again. From that perspective, what do you hope both your original OG readers like myself and newer readers get from this book, from this story?
Really, I just wanted to be taken seriously. Tell you the truth. I've always said to myself, if someone asks a question, it kind of fits in a weird way. It kind of fits in what you asked. Someone was asking about type of characters I would like to work on
from the Milestone Bible.
Yeah. And I said to myself, you know, it's been a long. I mean, to kind of follow up John Paul, I would love to like get my hands on some Shadow Cabinet stuff. I mean, I'm kind of working around them anyway. It's kind of weird because even when I was doing Heroes, they showed up, and I even added some new characters to it, like visually. Something that me and Matt Wayne kind of pulled together, and we added. I think it was Ramjet and that's the name of the other character. I'm gonna say Rocket, but that's not it. But those two characters, other characters that was connected to it, some stuff that I had created, I kind of threw into the mix. You know, I just think that universe was never really kind of delved into the way it needed to be, and but even though it was very, very deep, just like the way Blood Syndicate was kind of written and kind of pulled out into pieces and kind of given to people on the table so you can be able to read and understand where these characters are coming from.
Joe remembered for you. It's Ramjet and Windshear.
Ramjet and Windshear. Okay, thank you. Ramjet and Windshear. So my thing is, they're the characters that really have never been tapped into, and I just think being able to tell those stories, kind of add an extra. I kind of want to tackle Iron Butterfly too, but come on, a newer version of that.
Yeah.
But like visually, but it's such cool characters. The characters do some crazy stuff, and Dwayne was just a genius in kind of creating these characters anyway. So those are that kind of world I would love to be able to kind of.
You already got the Syndicate, Jeff. Can you share?
Relax, bro. Relax. It was, you want to fight everybody for everything. So
Jeff is claiming everything.
Every time you see a hula hoop, you want to jump in on it, kind of. You know, right?
Yo, my question for y'all: which one of y'all is gonna bring back Buckwild?
Listen, I will fight.
I'll leave that to Reggie Hudlin and Dennis Cowan to come back to work.
Jeff, you have to step in the ring with Evan for that one.
I actually was thinking about that just now. It's funny how you pulled that up out of the ether, because I was thinking, what about Buckwild?
Buck Wild needs to come back. Look,
I want a suite of Buck Wild miniseries where we rotate the creative team so everybody can get a taste.
When we did our milestone roundtable and we covered Blood Syndicate, there's a segment. Check out the site or the YouTube channel. There's a segment that we did, a quick take, just on Buck Wild, because he's such a beloved character, and he's beloved not just because he was just funny, one of the funniest segments I've ever read, but the commentary through that lens of the history of Black characters and how they were treated, going back to the Silver and Gold Age to the present times, and just that Bronze Age period where these characters were always kind of off,
right?
And the commentary on that.
The only person that could write that book right now is probably, other than Evan, it's probably Christopher Priest.
Yeah.
Maybe Joy Lewis can pull something up by it. Who knows? He's a good writer too. So
yeah. Well, I'll let y'all fight. I'll let y'all fight that out and figure out who's going to have Buck Wild. But somebody got to bring him back.
Buck Wild's crazy. When I read that character, I was like, "You seriously putting that character out there?"
My belief, define strength.
I'm not reading it.
Somebody needs to get Reggie on the phone and ask him to bring Buck Wild back. All right, so I wanted to ask you guys. Here's an opportunity for you to please tell us what other things that you got going on. Evan, one of the things you mentioned was your Amazing Man story that just came out last month.
Amazing Man story in the DC Power Anthology. Again, a book that centers and foregrounds DC's Black characters, done by new and established creators of color. Great stuff, including some people from the Milestone cohort. I have that story in there. Gotham Knights is still coming out. Gotham Knights Go to the City, the prequel to the video game.
I got a bone to pick with you on Gotham Knights.
Wow, we're gonna do this live. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm gonna do it live. I'll probably get in trouble. My partners, Black Comic Lords, are gonna chide me for this later, but I don't care. So last time I interviewed you, we talked about Gotham Knights, and you asked me who did I think it was, and I'm like giving these off the cuff answers. Like, I don't know.
Are you about to spoil shit for your viewership?
I'm not going to spoil it. But I will say the last two issues really just took a turn, and I was like, man, I had it all wrong. And the clues were all there, so I feel like an idiot now.
I believe I said that exact thing to you last time.
That's what you said to me. So
if you got a bone to pick and you got it wrong, so where's the bone?
I got a bone to pick with myself.
Exactly. I was like, you calling me out.
I was about to say.
I feel incredibly stupid.
Looking the man in the mirror, Paul.
Because you were laughing your ass off when I gave my answer. You're like, yeah, you need to keep reading.
Yeah. So
that's what I just want to say. Brilliant.
That's a long ass plug. I've got some more work from DC coming that I can't talk about. But one other thing I can talk about is I'm co-writing Waller vs. Wildstorm with Spencer Ackerman.
Are you?
Oh yeah.
That's you, man. I've been looking forward to that book.
How many other Evan Narcisses are there? I don't want to know. Don't answer that question.
I didn't know that you were writing that book. I mean, I know the book is coming out because it's on I pre-ordered it, but I didn't know who the writer was.
Yeah, that's mostly. Look, I'll be blunt. It's mostly Spencer's show. I'm there to support him. But it's an amazing, incredible story. Like, look, it is.
You're bringing back my boy Battalion. You had me at that.
Yeah. We do really some really fun stuff there. Shout out to Spencer and to Jesus and the whole team on that book. So that's kind of what I have going on. In video games, Redfall drops. I want to say May 1st or 3rd. I did some work on that. Can't wait for people to experience that. And my day job is at Grassline Entertainment, where I'm working on a game I can't talk about. But when that comes out, I'll be back on this podcast. I'm calling that shot right now, like Babe Ruth.
All right.
Or like Reggie Jackson. Let's give Reggie Jackson the love, Mr. October. Anyway, that's me.
Alex, why don't you make it judge, man? Bring it to bring it
fair modern era. You're right. Respect.
Chriscross, what do you got going on? What do you have?
There's a lot going on. Stuff that's forming that I can't really talk about. Stuff I'm trying to push through my own company, Eternal Kick. There's a creator-owned thing I'm putting together. I'm almost done with. Finally, you know how hard it is when you try to world build and try to make sure that it's not corny. and I'm doing that's almost done. They got Tower that's actually out now. That I work with Cameras and Kelsey Barnard.
I want to bring you and Cameras back here to talk about that when you get a chance.
I did my part on those books. It was fun to work with Cameras and work with Kelsey. It was really fun. I kind of changed my art style a bit to work with that. I didn't want it to be the same thing I was always doing. So I kind of simplified it, kind of add more solid blacks on those particular characters. Some stuff I borrowed from some anime I saw. And I wanted to kind of play with that style some more. I'm not really satisfied with, I'm never satisfied with myself, but pushing forward with that particular book, I think I did a pretty good job. Yes, it did do the cover. I did do the cover.
How many artists out there sit there and go, you know what? For this particular book, I'm just going to completely change my art style. Like, who does that?
I get sick of my stuff sometimes. You don't get sick of looking at the same thing. It's just like, I can do better than this. I don't know why. Why do I keep doing that? I don't want to do something else. Like, I get frustrated. I just have to. That's kind of my way of not being stale. I don't want to get to a point where my stuff start looking lackluster, and I start hanging my hands up and put on the hooks and want to go, sit in front of a nice Aruban beach and just kind of chill, which I still want to do anyway. But
shout out to you for Zero too. I was
about to get to that. Zero is a constantly morphing situation. As time goes on, I'll find out more about it. But Joe Illich had a big hand, and Christopher Priest had a big hand in putting that stuff together too, trying to get it to 50 Cent and Eric Alexander also would give her props too. Right. And I think that's when we really, really talk about something that happened in the 90s that's ahead of its time. I think God really, really blessed me and put me in the hands of people who were forward thinking. And they were, future sensitive with the stuff they were putting out. This Zero book is going to be just as mainstream and as present as it was then, but way ahead of its time still. Like, I don't think anyone has truly caught up with this kind of a storyline. So I can't wait to see what they do with it, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I mean, the stuff I have out now, other than Towers, some work I did with DC with Evan, and working with Cheryl, so many people, Cheryl and Eaton, with the Black Panther stuff and the Black Lightning stuff. For some reason, my brain is farting who wrote that. I'm so sorry. But there's a lot that's been going on. And I just finished doing something else for Marvel too. So maybe a little short story here and there. But I'm also working with indie pop right now also. So I'll probably talk about that at some point also. So my boy Brian David Marshall and Rachel Gluckstein. I keep messing her name up. Rachel G. We'll go with that. And I hope she don't beat me up for not being able to say her last name right. But yeah, so I'm working with them also, some smaller stuff, maybe something bigger. We'll see how it goes. But my hand is all over the place right now. So I'm trying to set up the future of my life, working on a really, really great project. So we'll see how it goes from here. But that's what I'm up to.
Well, we appreciate having both y'all on here. And now that you are on here, you're a part of the family. And one of the things that we like to do at Black Comic Lords at the end of these interviews
give us money
is almost as good.
Okay, I'll deal with it.
We like for you to quickly look at the camera and say your name and say, I am a Black Comic Lord, because you're now family.
I am Chriscross. I am now a Black Comic Lord because I am now family. And so are you.
My name is Evan Narcisse, and I'm a Black Lord. Feels weird. I'm a Black comic brother, and I embrace all my other.
All you gotta be different
out there. Yeah, why I'm a writer. Yeah, but it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you, Paul. And
thanks for asking me to come on again, y'all.
Hey, look, you guys. Look, I don't have to ask you, but you have an open invitation. You guys are welcome to come back anytime. Just email us, DM us. Say, hey, I've got a book coming out. Want to talk about it? We'll bring you on. Open invitation anytime.
Never know. Maybe me and Evan be doing something else on.
Man, listen. From your lips to assigning editors' ears.
Who we got to talk to? Who do I have to bother?
Well, we ain't gonna name names.
Maybe don't create all one. We'll see.
All
yes,
right.
yes,
All right.
I'd be down for that too.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I got ideas.
as part of your fan base, we look forward to anything you guys do together or
All
separate.
right.
All right. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you all for in the chat and who've been watching us and watching this great talent. Go out, make sure if you haven't pre-ordered it, please go to your LCS, let them know that you want to pick up this book. It's going to come out. I've read it myself. Trust me. If you are a Milestone Comics fan, this book is a love letter to you. This book is for you. Even if you're not familiar with the original stuff, you will love this book because it's in that same vibe.
I think this is for Uncle Dwayne too. So
yeah, man, listen, yeah. You know, as a closing note, I'll overshare. You know, and Joe, as somebody who I spoke to during the making of the documentary, I cried every day on set when we had to talk about Dwayne. He was a special person, and again, the fact that we get to carry on the work that he and his cohort did in establishing the universe is ultra meaningful for me. And look, if for some reason y'all ain't watched Milestone Generations, please go to your TV and put that on right now, okay? Yeah, okay. Brother's got to eat dinner, so I'm going to say goodbye.
Thank you all.
All right.
Take care, everybody. Thank you again.
Peace, man.
Derek?